probably like easily one of the most memorable, exciting moments of my life. And it was regular for me. For years, I would go back and do a tour that I began with a guy you probably know, Ed Byrne, and Canadian comedian Glenn Wool. We manifested this idea when we were in not in Meyerhofen, sorry, in Trois Vallées up in the French Alps, and we're doing comedy shows. You know, the three British-based comedians, two Canadian, one Irish, are in Mirabel, and we're in this stinky fucking fondue joint doing our stand-up, and we're just like, it was probably Glenn and I more than anything, but the confluence of Ed sort of made it more manifested and real. We're just like, what the. We're two Canadian comedians here in the French Alps entertaining British people in like a shut down restaurant. Why the hell haven't we taken this to like Canadian resorts? Why are we not doing Canadian stand-up shows for snowboarders and skiers in like the best resorts we know? So we set up that like basically bore what became the Snowed In comedy tour. So we tied it in with a guy. We needed like a Canadian anchor, so we got in touch with a dude over there to basically like set it up essentially so that we would come and do this trap line of it started like 10 or 13 shows, and it grew to like the last time I did it was like 35 shows over nearly 3 months in like the best resorts all across British Columbia and Alberta, and just like, and part of Vancouver. It's just amazing. It was a spectacular thing. But consequently, it meant that I like almost because I didn't care about I quit doing stand-up on New Year's Eve's like 20 years ago. And I've been doing comedy for like, this is my 35th year. And like literally 5 years in, 10 years in, I realized that like New Year's Eve is amateur drinking night. It's the last place that I want to try and like get a narrative going or make anyone laugh, because they're blotto and half of them are, like stoned out of their heads. Like, I'd rather be right now. Why am I working? Like I always had an attitude towards it. So consequently, I'd fly back normally on New Year's Eve because the price of the ticket would be so reduced. Back to Vancouver almost every time out of Heathrow. And usually the flight would arrive at like 6 p.m. and there'd be I'd have like about a 2-hour window to get out of Vancouver Airport and get to my favorite sushi restaurant on Robson Street in Vancouver with all of my buddies who I hadn't seen literally since like 8 months before when the tour ended last time, right? So it's like this constant thing. So I'm like kind of I'm in Vancouver Airport. I got my snowboard bag. I got my other like bag, and I'm waiting. And this Simpa, this is one of these things where you play into the system and then the system bites you in the ass. I'm sure the entire place now is entirely AI and robotic from like the bottom up, because it's Canada and they're so like fucking dystopian on the norm anyway. But regardless, it was just when it was like you could still, and I don't know if you still can, but you could choose whether or not you wanted to go through immigration and customs through the machine or to a person, right? So, and I'm one of those people. I'm like, I don't want to lose the cashiers at Tesco or Asda or wherever the hell you decide to shop. I wait. I'll wait 40 minutes. I'm normally not in that much of a rush, and I try and use my time judiciously, no matter what I'm doing. And I'll wait behind, people with a million bags of groceries just because I want to like make sure a cashier has a job tomorrow and the next day and forever. I'm that pushback. Asda has now gone 100% to automated checkouts. I don't shop at Asda now. That's my thing. You don't have to do that, but that's definitely my position. So there I am, Vancouver Airport. I got to make a decision. Do I want to go through the robot or a person? I still remember it, Simpa. I still remember thinking, no, I like, as much as I don't like these goons in polyester, I also don't want them to be unemployed. That's not good for me. It's not good for my kids. It's not good for society. They can change, but they can't change if they don't exist to start with, right? So I bothered to go through like the human being. I wait the 10 minutes that it wouldn't have been if I was at the fucking robot thing. And I still remember it. You and I know it, and everyone out there knows it, whether you want to be like, judgmental or not, or whether you think this is bias. I felt and you've had it a billion times in your life. You know your different archetypal presentation, how you're treated in British society, how you look, what shirt you're wearing, whatever your haircut is, your facial hair. Me, like this, long hair, snowboard bag. I get to the customs person, and Simpa, they had me naked and in handcuffs, fucking tied to the wall in their mind before I even said good morning to them, before I said good afternoon. And literally, I still remember the lady. I'm not going to get into the fundamentals of why I felt judged. And maybe it's my bias reversing back. I've had that feeling like she was, the teacher in Ferris Bueller's Day Off. She didn't like me at the gig. As soon as she could focus on me. Regardless, she put the W or the Y or the X or whatever their secret code was. Oh, Craigie in his snowboard bag and his long hair and his beard needs the extra checkaroo, right? So off I go. I'm now in the queue. There's 8 people lined up in the, in the zigzag fucking maze to get your bum checked, essentially on the metal tables. We've all seen them. You're in that area. And I'm just I'm waiting there for literally I'm full of coffee. I've been on a long flight from England. I've got nothing but sushi and hanging out with my buddies and having my first Asahi in my head already. I've got the sake that I want on the wall. I'm already drinking it. I'm what's going, and I just have that moment we've all had where you're just what the hell is actually, what's going on here? And I realize what's going on there is nothing. Nothing. There's 8, 10 people in front of me, and they're all just sitting there like normal people, either Canadians returning, hyper polite, or people who are first time in Canada thinking, well, they're nice people. This is going to be good. Whatever their thoughts are. Nobody looks agitated or bothered. And I'm just realizing whoa, I'm waiting here. And there's no one on duty at all, right? I can see across. And then, of course, I spot behind the stainless steel tables are the blanked out mirror windows, right? So, and I don't, anybody here is watching, this is a bit of advice from an old dog. You want to get those pricks off of their donuts and out of their coffees. First thing you do, and I did it, got out the camera, got out the phone, and started videoing everybody. Started videoing the lineup, started videoing the area, started videoing the window, started talking to myself about it. They came out of there like I'd kicked a wasp's nest, right? Just fucking blasted out of there. It's like coffee, spin, donut crumbs flying all over the place. They come up. One guy, of course, takes the lead on me. Says, "Sir, can you come through here?" So I now jump the queue out of nowhere, right? So I'm now can you open your bag and whatnot? And oh yeah, sorry. And first off, what do you think? Of course, you can't film in here, sir. Right away, right? Can't film. And I said, hey, that's fine. I've stopped filming, but it's not your right to take up hours of our life. I'm telling you that right now and for free, right? You can put the little squiggle on our little piece of paper and send us to the different queue so that we need secondary investigation. But it's not your right to finish your smoke or whatever the hell you're doing in there while people queue up on New Year's Eve waiting to go to see their loved ones in their lives, right? So and so the guy's just well, you're not allowed, normal fucking default. All the rules are there, and I just thought, okay, that's fine. Then check me. What do you need? What do you want to know? And the guy from that little breakdown, he just said, this is one of my Simpa. This is just one of my favorite. I wouldn't have had any attachment to Panto without living in the UK for as long as I had up to this point. Canadians wouldn't even have had an association with what Panto is. But after that little, we had that back and forth. And this is another thing, people might seem that this is me embellishing, but it's also, and something that I take, and I don't do it in the UK. I have a different relationship with authority here, but it is one of the things that I most cherish about my relationship. And you probably have it from growing up in your own area. You know it so well. You know the rules, you know the laws, you know everything about it. One of the things I most hold dear is how I and many people I know in my life behave towards authority in Canada. Right? I do not fear them at all in slightest. So if you think I'm playing up how I was behaving, that is exactly how I was behaving. If anything, I was being more over the top than I've displayed right now to get that guy out of his room to now confront me. And we got to that little, stalemate, and I just said, do what you got to do. What's your thing? And he said, well, do you know why we're now speaking to each other? And I said, no, I can think of many different reasons, but that would probably get me arrested to say them out loud here. What, why have you bothered to annoy me on this fine evening, sir? And he said, well, I'll just be frank with you. Drugs. And the Simpa, again, like I can't possibly overact. And bear in mind, like now, like, I'm about to start like a 40-date comedy snowboard tour at all the resorts of that province alone. And I'm in front of like a queue of tourists and semi-Canadians, for all I know, that are like watching this spectacle unfold. And I must have held on to my guts and screamed out loud with my back arched in fake laughter for 9 solid minutes. I can tell you, I was howling. I was not allowing myself to get a breath out of fake laughing in this guy's face. And by the time I could finally bring myself to inhale enough to get a conversation, I said, do you just like in fits, right? Just right in front of this guy, crying now. Just, do you I'm smuggled from London, England. To Vancouver, Canada. I just like was literally on that, laying on the ground, rolling around like a maniac. And I just said, like, is it your first day on the job, sir? Like, once I composed myself, I was just like, do you actually believe? Do you have any idea how much any drug costs? Any drug, you name one tiny bit of contraband or prohibited item in London, England. Can you imagine what the margins would have to be for me to take the risk, looking like I do with a snowboard bag, to bring illegal drugs in a quantity necessary to make a profit, when I can actually, and at this point, like, and it's Vancouver Airport, I can see like through other windows, I can see outside, I can see Richmond, British Columbia beyond the like containment room we're in. And I'm like, what, name a drug? Because I can tell you that, like, I've lived in Vancouver. Within a 3-minute cab ride, I can get you what you need in the quantity that you need it. Not tomorrow, not next week, not to make a deal for next month. Today, now, right away. And then he came back at me. He said, and I'm sure you've had this in your own back and forth with the police. He said, you seem to know a lot about it. And I just said, I know everything about it. Mm-hmm. I make it my business to know everything about it. I can tell you every little stage of it all along the way. I know how many illegal operations take place. I know how much a pound of Canadian Northern Lights hydro trades for directly at the border with Washington State for Colombian cocaine. I can give you today's prices in every increment you can dream of. And he just said, at this point, I'd already told him, I said, and the other thing is I'm a comedian. And I'm on stage for like the next 2 months. And unless you want to be referenced by your name tag and your specific name, Mr. Chen, I'd suggest that you get me to my sushi appointment like yesterday. And he took me to a side door that I didn't even know existed, Simpa, in the Vancouver like control area. And literally, like on the way through, like kicked the double doors open and just said, when's your show? I'll put you on the door, buddy. And that was like, for me, just one of the like, wowie, don't kid a kidder. Don't for a moment think that like I need to be, because I think like you do, Simp, I think how many guys, how many kids, how many people half my age that look just like me. And I see them all the time. I especially saw them when I was snowboarding, guys that literally looked like me in a Russian doll, different age, same beard, same long hair, same snow pants. And how many people like that over their careers have they treated like a dickhead? And finally, they pulled the wrong straw. They finally pulled the wrong guy in and tried to be, authoritarian towards somebody who knew way more the hell about it than they ever dreamt could possibly happen to them. And they literally dumped in their own pants and kicked me out a side door at the airport from the security zone. So, like, that I take pride in that. It's why I would never behave that way in the UK in front of, I wouldn't even know where to start with like the kind of milieu of opaqueness of how things work here. But like Canada, I'm just like, I'm not taking this. There's no way. You don't get to do this. You like, you want to like ruin people's day or whatever your thing is. But if you're so out of your mind that you think that somebody would smuggle drugs from England to Canada, where literally it's the cheapest place on earth outside of maybe Brazil to get drugs, like you're just clueless. You shouldn't even be here. I'm embarrassed for you that you would even ask me. It's just wonderful. Sorry. So comedy.
Let me give you my quick rebuttal anecdote, because I just got caught up by Toronto airport security. So as I was telling you before, when I flew to the States, I did 6 weeks in America, did about 6,000 miles in rented cars and hit various legal states. And then I flew back via Toronto, purely because when I used to do live streams on Facebook, some to quite varying degrees of success, but I quite international audience, random people here and there. And one of them was this guy that I'd sort of met online in Toronto, and he was like, "Oh, dude, how are you doing this trip, man? You should come by. Like, you come meet these farmers and that. We'll put you up for a bit. We'll look after you for a week." And I was like, "All right, sounds cool. So I've blown through most of my budget and everything else. And I had like this reserve money for what I needed for it. I'd budgeted out what I needed. So I got the car rental. I'd what I needed and a little bit more, and a credit card. And I was like, worst comes to it, fuck credit card. So fuck the credit card. I hate the credit card, but if it came to it, and thank fuck that I did, because I landed me and 4 Chinese nationals to a side door. And as you said, it's the banality of it. There's next to no one around, but there's like 16 cameras, a bajillion blacked out bits of glass. The way everything like narrows into certain positions, and then the chairs and all the infrastructure is so just like, what the fuck? And then they pulled me and they started going to my suitcase and like, so we just stopped you because like, where are you staying? Where are you going? I'm like, why do you need to inquire about that? I was like, I've submitted in the paperwork for my documentation that I'll be staying at this address for the first evening. That's all the law says that I have to submit to you. I'm like, well, we're just confused. But it was really, like I said, benign. It wasn't aggressive. They were just like, oh, so what are you doing? And I'm like, wait. And I had to explain.
Sorry. I always describe Canada, and you'll appreciate this for that. I call us fascism with a smile. Sorry to interrupt, but that's what Canada is. They're just like, hi, how can we help you today? Well, they fist you. Sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, 100%. The friendliest fuck you I've ever had.
Yeah, totally.
And I may or may not have had a DMT cart left over in my case. So I was slightly nervous about that being discovered. But so they were going through it, and they were like looking for cash and big things. And they were saying like, well, just your... what was it? Your previous flight designation in history. You've left LA. You've been out in America. Why is it you were in this spot? And I didn't think about it. And I was like, oh, Canada's changing the law in like 3 months. It's going to be legal here. So I was like, oh, I actually went to speak at the world's largest hemp.
Oh no.
Yeah, I basically I went to this thing called Hemp Fest in Washington, and then I went down to Oregon. I went to Colorado, and I did this, and I was just like, just tell them about it. You know what I mean? And that, like, looking at what the fuck? And it was literally getting to about 10 o'clock at night at this point. The other Chinese nationals had kind of gone. They'd been scrutinized, and basically they were looking for cash. I'm sure of it. They just basically went through looking for money, and then when they found out, they just got kicked them off, went to the next one. Yeah. And they're kind of looking at me, and then somebody else comes in, and they go off the chat, and there's a paper, and they're talking. And they were like, so what happens if this, because I had to explain how I met this guy. And I was like, well, basically, I do live streams because in my country, I do X, Y, Z. And they're like, And this guy said I should come and see you and stop with him. And they're like, what if you, and it was childish as fuck, but it was like, what if you fall out with him? And I was like, I'll stay in a hotel. I'm an adult. I've got my passport and money. And they're like, but what if this and what if this? And it was like, you're not my parents. It was just this so interfering sort of thing. And I was trying to equal the line of responding slow enough that I wasn't just being like, what? and seeming that they wanted to go further into it, but also actually responding to them to understand the situation, because I couldn't get my head around it. I was like, I've broken no law. I specifically double checked the night before in a hotel in LA when I left, like, because I did a lot of camping in the States, so I had like a Bowie knife and a fucking tent and loads of stuff. But no, I left it in the hotel.
Okay.
So, and I left it with a note saying to Goodwill. And like you're saying about leaving drugs, I left whatever bits of weed and edibles on the side for the cleaners. I was like, enjoy the edibles. Please donate this to Goodwill.
Oh, you're a good man.
I'm off. And, so it landed. And then, by the time they got us out, the car rental guy was gone. So they'd eventually just kind of gone, well, you can find what was it? You can financially support yourself. So therefore, you're free to go. And it was just kind of what? And then I went down and I was like, there's no one at the desk. There's no one at the fucking desk. And luckily, it was like, I think from 5 to 11, something like that. And the desk was shutting at 11 for the cars. And if I couldn't have got that, I couldn't have got in contact with the other guy because I'd just landed in the country, which was my SIM card. My US SIM card had died. And I had to wait for my Canadian SIM card to kick in. So I was like contactless. Do you know what I mean? Of these things, they'd held me up long past the window.
Thought you'd stiffed him and wouldn't have been there. Yeah.
Yeah. So I got the car rental arranged. Thankfully, like the guy came in and was like, "All right, the paperwork's fine." And I got the last pick. You know what I mean? I got the last thing from the evening, and it wasn't too bad. It was just a bit short, sedan-y thing, and I wanted something a bit bigger because the fucking Canadian roads are straight forever and. Yeah, your cops are not the smartest on the road, it would seem. Allegedly, huge allegedly. But yeah, and they then kind of released us, and it was like I said, the banality of it. And then versus the only other time I really had an issue is I may or may not have flown back from Ireland to the UK one time, allegedly, for comedy's sake, YouTube, on LSD. And the security got stopped and they scanned my bag. And I thought, what the fuck? And basically, I had a stack of flyers, like legalized drug flyers. I'd been out for a movie premiere in Dublin for one of Clark French's movies and been enjoying sort of the atmosphere, whatever else. Yeah, made sure I'd left all the fucking drugs except for allegedly, but for the sake of this joke. And yeah, I took this, and it's gone. It's come up with this, and this kid it was quite a late shift again to get on a Ryanair flight. He spun it around and went, "Oh, it's this thing here." I was like, "It's an organic object." And I went, "No, it's not." He opened it, it was like all these flyers. He's like, "Oh, this is interesting. What's this for?" And I'm on fucking acid, like, and chatting about it. He's like, "So what are you looking for?" He's like, "Oh, I've got to now do the wand." And she pulls out a wand. I'm like, "What's that for?" He's like, "Oh, it's for explosives and for drugs and dirt." And I'm like, "Oh, that's interesting. That's interesting." And it literally just like started coming up more and more as I go through. The Ryanair flight was like 55 minutes of hell. First time I'd ever flown like fucking Ryanair. Actually, no, the second time because I'd flown out on Ryanair, but didn't notice they play continuous adverts. Yeah, it's through the fucking over the thing.
So it wasn't the acid; it was Ryanair.
No, it was definitely Ryanair. I've subsequently checked, and I've been sober on a Ryanair flight, and that is what they do. And yeah, and they're trying to sell you shit constantly. And I was literally, I didn't realize at that altitude, there's something happens because LSD affects like the hypothalamus and like temperature regulation and all other kinds of parts of the cognition, and something with the altitude and the pressure. And it was just like a different level. And I'm quite, well versed in these things, but it was just such a like. The fuck? And then luckily got back into the UK, Newcastle, bless Newcastle fucking airport. I don't even think there's a desk in there for customs anymore. You just land and fuck off.
Like,
yeah, fucking fun times. Yeah, it's.
I've flown a few times on acid. Also, I know what you're talking about, and I've always. It's funny. The most like capable drug people that I ever grew up knowing, like early paternal relationships with people that advised like a few kind of the tenets of drug use, always said, "Don't ever fly on hallucinogens. Don't fly on acid. Don't fly on mushrooms. Don't." And I to this day. It's never bitten me in the ass, Simpa. I've bucked the trend. I've always very much enjoyed it. Certainly makes the flight go by more, less banal, as you mentioned. There's never a dull moment, that's for sure. The last
100%.
time I microdosed on a Ryanair flight, and it luckily kind of peaked in the boarding in the lounge area. Thankfully, I'd been told that microdosing kind of sits at a sub hallucinogenic level, they say, but I definitely had I had some movement. I thought, oh great, I'm the guy, just like just doing this, so I felt a bit better about my Tuesday, and now I'm gonna be, you start to see yourself in a straitjacket in seconds, don't you? It's just I quite enjoy that experience, though. Of course,
it would be so interesting. Maybe, I don't know, I have an audience all over the place. This could maybe happen if you work for KLM particularly, and you fly the Amsterdam back to anywhere in the fucking UK. I want to talk to you because the shit you will have seen. Because I've flown allegedly, again, for humor's sake, potentially, bought truffles over there in a legal jurisdiction. If it happens to fall in like an M&M's packet or something like that, and you're eating it as you go through customs, no one's going to bat a fucking eyelid. This is not to be construed as legal advice, but then you can obviously have quite a fun interaction. And again, I wouldn't advise for first timers. Obviously, do you know what I mean? Putting yourself in a tin can of fart at fucking a couple hundred miles an hour. Yeah, it's the same thing with the pink elephant. When you're on the plane and you may have taken one of those things, just don't think that it can come down. Do you know what I mean? It's going to come down at the end of the flight. But it's one of those things that you can't get over. I mean, I had a weird fear of flying when I was younger. I couldn't trust the idea of there not being a floor because I'm on the floor. Like my feet, like when I was quite, a lot younger, like my feet are on the floor on the plane, but the plane leaves the floor. So, but I'm on the floor. Like, do you know what I mean? I'd never quite got over that until probably one of these times on drugs where it's like, the floor is down there.
Oh, it's relative. I have a relative. There's two floors.